In this video, I'm going to go over map and replace functions in Pandas. Now, the map function is useful when you want to apply a function to each element of a sequence, right? And this sequence could be a list or a data frame, okay? And this returns a sequence of the transformed data elements. In addition, the map functions can be useful when you want to apply custom functions, especially in the transformation of the data in a Pandas data frame. Particularly useful if you are performing data cleaning, data preprocessing, and feature engineering tasks. We can also use the map functions with other built-in functions such as the length and strength. Again, these are useful functions when we just want to perform quick data transformations. Now let's look at our first example. Suppose we have this data frame, right, that has the following dictionary with the key value pairs, where the keys here will be our column, country, and population. Then these are the values, right? So we run this. You can see we have our data frame here in a table format. We have the country and population of the columns, the corresponding values populated in this table. So the next thing we want to create, let's create another dictionary, right? And this dictionary just corresponds to the, it just contains a list of countries with their capital cities, right? So we run that. Now, how do we use the map function? We can use the map function in this example by, so here, this code chunk here, what it says here, first of all, we want to use this map function, right? So here we create a new column called capital. So remember, we already created a dictionary here. So we want to run this map function, right? And apply on this column country column in our data frame, our existing data frame. So we'll try and match for each of these keys here, China, all the way to Nigeria, right? We'll be checking on this dictionary, right? Capital, and tries to match the key value pairs, right? And then store this in a new data frame that includes the capital column. So this will be the new column that's created in addition to country and population. So this column will only include those keys here that match rather will contain the values that match the key from here that match the key in this data frame, right? So when we run this, you can see it just returns a new column with the transformed data elements that actually match the country, right, in the existing data frame. Okay, so let's look at another example just to drive the point home here. So suppose we have this data frame. So this data frame just contains a sample data of temperature, right? Okay, now we can define a lambda function. Okay, so a lambda function essentially is just an anonymous function that we use in Python, especially when you don't want to assign a variable, right? And we can perform these functions just inline, right, without just assigning the variable. Okay, so the lambda function just takes some arguments, right? These arguments could be separated by a comma, but in this case, we just want to say lambda, here's lambda, right, x. And then on this other side of the column, we can supply the expression. So let's say we want to transform this Celsius into Fahrenheit. So we can give it by this formula, x multiplied by 9 divided by 5, right? Then we can add 32. So essentially, that's just the formula for that. Then we want to apply this lambda function using the map function. Okay, this map function, again, we can see this lambda can be used with map function and other different functions like filter and reduce, right? So how do we do this? So the next thing, we're just gonna specify the column that we want to apply our map function. So again, this is temp. Remember, so this is the existing data frame temp, right? So that will look like that. So temp C, and then we use the map function, map, right? And then we apply the function that we just created, okay, C to F. So let's just go over what we've just done here. So essentially what we are saying here is that we first of all, we define a lambda function called C to F, right? This takes the temperature, Celsius, right? This is our temperature in Celsius, right? And converts that to Fahrenheit using the formula. This is the formula. So for each of these values will be transformed based on this formula here. This is the expression, okay? And then we use the map function here. Okay, we use this map, all right, to apply this lambda function on this column temperature C, which contains these values, right? And then we return a new column with the transformed data elements, and we call this temp underscore F, right? When we run this, you can see now we have a new column with the transformed values that have already been applied based on this, applied with this function, lambda function, okay? All right, now that we know that, let's move over to replace. Replace is fairly simple and straightforward. So suppose we have this data frame, right? Let's print it out. So we have two columns, call 1, call 2, right? And the associated values. So let's say we wanted to replace this value here, 10, okay? So first of all, we create a new dictionary, right? That contains key value pair, right? And we can say that, okay, we want to replace maybe this column 1 with maybe some value, right? And this value could be, could match A, for example, okay? So what we'll do here, we'll replace both 10 and 20 because it's actually in our dictionary here. We want to replace that with A and B. So what we'll just do, we just type this. So from our data frame, we want to the affected column will be column 1 dot, then we apply this function replace. Then we pass the values that we want to replace, okay? So dictionary 1 just contains this key value pair that will just check in our column for these keys, 10 and 20. If it finds it, it replaces it with A and B, a string. Now this in place true essentially just tells Python that we just want to maintain, we don't want to create a new data frame. So just maintain the original object. So we don't need to create a new data frame. So we do that and we can see our output here, our results. So you can see very powerful. So we replaced 10 and 20 with A and B. And then lastly here, let's just do a quick other example. Suppose we have this data frame, okay? And we want to replace the occurrences, right? With maybe values 2 with 20, okay? So this replace can have two parameters. We can say to replace, specify what we want to replace. So here we want to replace a value 2. So specify that 2, and then we want to replace with the value 20. Then we specify this parameter here, argument in place equals to true. That means we don't want to create a new data frame. We just want to apply to the existing data frame, okay? So with that, we just click on that, rather we run that, and we can see we just replaced 2 with 20, right? Again, we can try another example here. So suppose we just want to create another dictionary, right? So we want to replace this. So in our data frame here, we already have alpha, beta, gamma, right? And our keys that we want to replace for this, okay, we want to replace it with foo, bar, and jukes, right? That means we want to replace these 3 values, okay? So to do that, again, just gonna call our data frame and call this function replace. Then we specify what we want to replace, right? We, you know, that will be a new dictionary that contains a key value pair. So essentially, just keep on checking, you know, for this key, what do you want to replace it with? Foo, right? For this key, what do you want to replace it with? Bar. So we're going to replace those 3 values. So we run that again. We will see that we just replaced the first 3 values in our column C. So again, in summary, we can see how you can use map and reduce, you know, to streamline some of the processes of the data transformation and analysis pipeline. So these are just useful functions that can come in handy during the entire pipeline in data cleaning, data preprocessing, transformation, and analysis of your data set.